Hey, it's your host Craig Bielik here on Untamed TV. Thanks for joining us today. Really appreciate you guys checking in with us. We are joined today by Dr. Stanton Bailey, who is an OBGYN practicing in Brigham City, Utah. Welcome, Dr. Bailey.
Well, great. It's great to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here. Tell us, before we launch into much, tell us a little bit about your background. You were telling me just a bit about it before we hit the camera, but it's always interesting to know how you came to be where you're at.
Well, I actually grew up in Bountiful and lived there, and then went off to medical school in Virginia. Then I was in Texas, and then I was on an Air Force scholarship, so went to Europe for a little while, and then came back and practiced here. Now I was actually practicing down in Nephi for the last about 15 years, and
Nephi, folks, look it up. Google it. Get a map.
Little town, and there was an OBGYN who retired here in the area, and so they called me up and said, "Hey, how would you like to come up to Brigham City?" And that was about a year ago, and since then we've been here.
Here you are. Where did you go to medical school?
The Medical College of Virginia in Richmond, Virginia.
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. Where'd you do your undergrad?
At the University of Utah. Go Utes.
Go Utes. There you
right.
go. There you go. And you've been practicing OBGYN for how long?
93 until now, so 24 years.
Oh, I thought you were going to say 93 years. I was going to say, wow, that has to be interesting.
Not quite, but yeah, quite a few years.
So I think most people know what the OB stands for. It's delivering babies.
Right. Obstetrics.
Any guess how many babies you've delivered?
Boy, I used to keep count. And I had a book, and I would write all the names down. And once I hit about 6,000, and that was over a decade ago. So I'm guessing bumping up on 10,000. I'd imagine somewhere in that
10,000 babies.
Yeah,
10,000 babies brought into this world by you. Congrats! That's a good thing.
Yeah, it's been an amazing career. I really love it. I always tell people I have the best job in the world with the worst hours.
That's right. Babies are so inconsiderate.
Yeah, they never come when you want them to.
And they're inconsiderate all the way till they're, 50 years old or something like that. They just tend to be that way. So that's the OB. Now we get to the GYN, and this is where a lot of people get very confused. What does GYN stand for?
That stands for gynecology, and you can really think of that as the medicine of women and women's health concerns. Is gynecology.
Right. Everything but the baby.
Everything but the baby.
Exactly.
And from usually, from about teenage on until they pass.
I think that's a good point, because a lot of people, when I talk to them, because I work for a hospital, a lot of people say to me, well, gynecology is women 50 plus, and that's not always true. That's a big part of your practice.
No, I would say the majority of my practice is actually younger women, probably between the age of 12 to 40. I actually see probably many more of them than the older women.
Right. We were talking right before we came on air, and one of the things that is common in your practice is to talk to young women about abnormal bleeding.
Yes, yeah. It's a huge part of our practice. Especially women nowadays, maybe more than when I was a kid growing up, so many young women nowadays are into sports, and they're doing a lot of athletics, dance, which I consider just as much an athlete as a football player.
You don't think it's athletic. Go dance for 4 or 5 hours at a time.
And oftentimes when young women are that active in their lives, they'll have incredibly bad periods, one way or the other, either prolonged periods that just last a long time, or just very, very painful periods. And nowadays, there are just amazing new therapies for younger women. To help with their bleeding.
Absolutely, we will get to that. But I want to back you up just a tad, and I want to talk about what is abnormal bleeding. If you were looking to a person out there that's watching this show right now, young lady, 21 years old, something like that, maybe she plays a lot of volleyball, something like that. What is abnormal bleeding?
That's a loaded question.
Okay.
Because I always say abnormal bleeding is whatever my patient feels like is abnormal for her.
Okay.
And for some women, they can bleed for a week very heavily, and they think that that's normal. The strict definition is a period that would last more than 5 days, or somebody who's changing a tampon or a pad more than every hour. But when you're an athlete or when you're doing a lot of things in school. It may just be that you just don't want to have a period on a weekend when you've got some competition or when you're doing something else. And so a lot of the new hormonal therapies that we use for young women, literally in their teens, are trying to make it so women just don't have periods at all. We have new...
Wait a minute. I mean, is that possible? I mean, not being a woman, I don't know. I have to admit that I don't know a lot about this, but how is that possible?
Well, I always go back to when I do talk to patients about this, and I always say, well, when 1,000 years ago, when we lived in caves, a young woman, the minute she started having periods, would probably get pregnant back then. And then they would be pregnant for, let's say, a year. And it's not quite a year, but a year. And then they would breastfeed for another 2 years. So for about probably 3 years of their lives during that pregnancy and then having that baby, they wouldn't have any periods. So you don't have a period when you're pregnant. You don't have a period usually while you're breastfeeding. Then they would maybe have a period or two and they'd get pregnant again. And that would just go over and over and over. And so literally a woman 1,000 years ago, when we used to live back in a cave, would probably in their lifetime maybe have 20 periods in their lifetime.
Really?
Yeah. So it was, having a period month after month after month, year after year after year. It's just not the way our bodies were designed. And so the new hormonal formulations that we use are kind of more designed to mimic probably what was more natural, which is to go prolonged periods of times without periods at all.
Interesting. Interesting. So these young women, a lot of women are coming to you and saying, what sort of options do I have now?
Right.
And it sounds like there are options.
There are fantastic options. Everybody always thinks about the pill. Almost everybody who comes in to see me for bleeding will, their sister's been on the pill or their mom was on the pill. And that's really kind of down in my options. Nowadays, we use these things that we call LARCs, which is long-acting reversible contraceptives.
Okay.
And those are things like an IUD that we can actually put a small hormone containing, it almost looks like a little rod up inside the uterus. And most women who have that done, once it's in place and starts working, they won't have periods. And that can be either for 3 years or up to 5 years, as long as we leave that in. Another one we have, which is the same way as a little rod that we'll put in a woman's arm. And it pretty much does the same thing. Either makes their periods very light or sometimes goes away completely.
On that. Is this a difficult procedure, and do patients tolerate that well?
It's amazingly simple, and in some women, if you've never had a baby, it can be, we always say uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable.
Which means
right.
It's not horribly painful, but it's kind of like having, I always tell my patients, kind of like having your teeth cleaned.
Yeah.
Not something you'd want to have done. Not painful enough you need to go to sleep for it, but, uncomfortable for a little bit. But that's one thing we use. The other thing, there's a new, and it's really not new, it's been on it's been out on the market quite a while, which is a little ring that a woman just puts up inside her vagina, and it does the same thing. Releases the hormone, gets absorbed by the body, and you can just put a new ring every month, and then you just don't have periods as long as you're putting a new ring in every single month.
Wow.
You can do that. And there are pill options too. So for women who don't want to maybe get that intrusive, there are pill options now where you only have a period every 3 months or every 6 months, or even ones that we can do where you only have a period once a year.
Wow. See, again, I am woefully uneducated in this manner, and this is very good information and new information to me, and probably a new information to a lot of you people out there, too, on that. So if you are a young woman and the things you've described are happening to you, and some of these options sound good, how do you start? Do you go to a family doctor? Can they just call your office? How does it work?
Yeah, usually I don't recommend people go to your family doctor is great, and if you want to start there, that's fine. But most of them really aren't up on the latest things, the latest hormonal therapies or the latest techniques we use. And usually they'll refer them to me because they've been struggling trying to use pills or different things. If they call our office, we can easily get them in. There are 2 gynecologists, me and Dr. Ferguson, in our office, and we also have a midwife, Annie Overson. A lot of young women don't want to go see an old guy like me.
Now, wait a minute. Okay, you said old guy. I didn't say that.
I'm never offended by that. And a lot of times I'll even have a woman come in and a young woman to speak with me about this. And I can kind of tell they're maybe uncomfortable with a guy doing their exam. And I always offer them, that we have a midwife, a woman available that can do it too. Right. But the truth is, most of them, after they've met me and talked with me, feel very comfortable with anything that we're going to do.
I would think so. So, I mean, the bottom line is, if you've got an uncomfortable period, if you've got unusual bleeding, and unusual is unusual to you,
right?
Because everybody's body's different. There was no quality control in manufacturing humans. We need to speak to somebody about that. We need to get some standards. Yeah, that sort of thing. But if you're uncomfortable, if you're experiencing those kind of things, talk to a gynecologist. Call Dr. Bailey. Don't be embarrassed. I mean, this is. Like I said, he's delivered 10,000 babies. Okay,
and I have 5 daughters too, so I'm used to dealing with young women with these problems.
You have 5 daughters? Any men in the family?
Not a one. I now have 2 son-in-laws, but no, 5 daughters.
Wow,
that's it.
Wow. So you know this stuff.
I know it inside and out.
You know this stuff. So, ladies out there, if you're uncomfortable about anything with female parts, please seek advice from your gynecologist. And a great gynecologist would be this guy right here, Dr. Stanton Bailey, up there in Brigham City. Thanks for joining us today on Untamed TV. And as always, we appreciate your call and questions. Give us a call, and thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.